Hello everybody. This is Uncle Louie coming back at you with another episode of this podcast. And this is episode number six. Number six, can you believe that? Episode number six. You know, this episode is titled Paranormal Phenomena or Phenomenon, however you choose to pronounce it. Um, and by the way, just a quick little heads up. Where I am right now is incredibly windy, so please forgive me if the winds are very strong, or if you find it a little bit disturbing. No, if you find it a nuisance. Again, this is Uncle Louie's podcast, so everything's raw, uncensored, unfiltered. You know, so I don't go against nature here, and if nature decides, well, we let it be, then that's what it is. So, on to the phenomenon, as I said earlier. So, I don't know about all of you, but personally, I find myself, or I consider myself to be a firm believer of the paranormal, whether it be just whether it be just you know supernatural in a sense, just ghosts or demons, but all sorts of everything within the paranormal category. As ridiculous as this one might sound, like Bigfoot, the Loch Ness monster, the Jersey Devil, um, aliens, all these phenomena, cryptids as well. Cryptids like the skinwalker and little fairies and little goblins and whatnot, or gnomes as they're also known as. And when thinking about my paranormal encounters per se, I have to say that there's quite a long list of all of it, because throughout my life I have had many encounters with different aspects of the paranormal. And one of the things that I do want to say, for all of you who are probably the non-believers or the skeptics, as you're commonly known or referred to, one of the key things to experiencing paranormal phenomenon is kind of having the mindset for it, because it just doesn't happen out of just what you create, but you do have to be open to these things. Now, I will say this ahead of time, kind of as a as a precaution, so to speak, a warning. If you do decide to kind of like have more of an open mind, and have like truly put in the depths of your consciousness that you're willing to kind of take that step to at least try to believe, or or at the very least say there's a possibility. Be open to that possibility. You know, be careful, because if you do go into that mindset, there's kind of no way from getting back from that. Because once you kind of open your mind to that, to the idea of the possibility of paranormal phenomenon out there, whether they be ghosts, or demons, or cryptids like the skinwalker, or fairies, witches, all vampires, all these things. Once you open your mind to that, you there's really no turning back. I mean, maybe with enough years, if you really ignore it or become very ignorant of those things and refuse it, there's a very small chance that you could just, in a sense, turn that off. And what I mean by turn it off is, when you open yourself to these types of phenomena, you open, in a sense, you open the door. Now, there's no telling what kind of whether I'll specifically go into just the ghosts for now. But there's no telling what kind of ghosts you're gonna get. You could get good spirits who just maybe just wanna they want to be recognized as being there. Maybe they can't move on, and they want to they want someone to see them to say, hey, I'm still alive, like someone can see me. They want to get your attention. And then on the other end, you have the more malevolent spirits, or sometimes they're not even spirits, or in a sense they're not even human, and they just want to cause, they want to do you harm. They have a lot of evil in them, a lot of malevolence in their agendas. So again, kind of reiterating here what I said earlier, if you're a skeptic and you really like, if you're not gonna be prepared for what's to come and kind of face the consequences of it, then I advise you not to do this. Not really just keep denying it as you always are, and you'll probably never come across them. Not that's not to say that you'll never come across them, because even to my knowledge, I've found people that were skeptics, and they were complete skeptics at heart, naysayers, the non-believers, and even they still had the experiences as well. So just because you're a skeptic doesn't mean that you're out of that zone of interaction. Just saying. It greatly reduces the chance of you being involved with anything of that sort, but that doesn't mean that it's 100% guaranteed that you're never going to have an encounter. So, one of the stories that I really wanted to share with all of you, my listeners, is something that happened quite recently. And this was, for this particular podcast, or for this particular episode, I should say, this is going to be the first part of a multi-part series of paranormal phenomenon. Where I basically tell a lot of a lot of experiences and stories about what I've been through. True stories of what of the things that I've seen, what I've encountered, and what 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 I've really come across. And so, with that being said, this event that I'm getting into is it happened a couple of days ago. I want to say maybe like 3 to 4 days ago. I believe it was during the weekend. It was either Friday night or Saturday night, more than likely Saturday night. And I was, at the time, I was on the phone talking to a good friend of mine, and we were talking about a lot of things. But one of the final things we had a conversation over before I hung up and before I started heading home, it was we were talking about the paranormal. We were talking about ghosts and the cryptids and all of those, all of that, all of the paranormal in a sense. And we were talking about it for quite a while. And then some, you know, every time I feel like every time you talk about the paranormal, it's literally just like an open invitation when you do that, because you're recognizing it as something that's plausible, as a possibility, and because of that, you're creating that atmosphere. In a sense, like you're basically becoming a beacon for all of these entities out there, whether they be good or bad. You're basically becoming a beacon because you're just by talking about it, and in my case, because I'm a firm believer, I basically became a beacon for all of these entities to kind of find me, or to try, or to be more willing to act on interaction, or some kind of some form of communication. And so, my friend and I were talking about the paranormal. I started getting this weird vibe, like I was being watched as we were talking about the paranormal. And shortly, maybe a couple minutes after, we both hung up because it was pretty late, and I wanted to go home, and I was just like, what, I think we should just call it a night, and we'll talk another time. And this, mind you, this was over the phone, so I hung up, or we both hung up, and I started listening, almost as if I was trying to purposely put myself in the position of having that that scared, kind of creepy, you know, of like terrorized atmosphere, that very paranoid type of mentality. Because what does Uncle Louis do? Well, ladies and gentlemen, older ladies, older gentlemen, younger ladies, younger gentlemen, and everybody in between, Uncle Louis decided to go on YouTube and, while I was just kind of waiting a couple of minutes to, get my things ready and just kind of be outside, just in silence, in a sense, just relax a couple of minutes. Uncle Louis decided to, myself, I decided to listen to ghost stories. I can't exactly recall the YouTube channel that I started listening all this from, but this channel is well known to have a bunch of ghost stories, and like they have like 45 or hour or 2 hour or 3 hour videos on just someone, the I guess the the person in charge of that channel, just narrates the stories, and he finds, it's a guy, and he finds these stories through different sources. I think one of the sources is this website called Reddit, and another source is sometimes people just email him stories that or experiences that they've gone through. And so while I'm listening to all this, like I said earlier, I was basically putting myself in that type of mentality to basically become scared, or to, open that door for something to happen, for some type of interaction to occur. And maybe like 10, 15 minutes passed by, and I thought, well, okay, now it's time. It's getting very late, and I really do need to go home. So, I started walking back to my house, and along the way, in a portion of the neighborhood that was pretty much isolated and not a single person out and around. Um, I guess I should mention, while I was walking, I had one earbud on my left ear, and my right ear was like, it had nothing, just so I could still hear, should a car come. That way I can get out of the way, and, not be completely into the actual video and the content of the video itself. That way I can still focus on my surroundings. And so as I'm walking with just, the earbud on my left ear, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I hear, very as clear as day, a woman kind of make this moan, or this kind of whine, and, right next to my right ear, the one that didn't have the the earbud in. And, I was, at first, I thought maybe it was from the YouTube video that I was watching. Maybe it was like a special effect. But if it was from the YouTube video, how come I didn't hear it on my left ear, where the earbud was in? Why was it on my right ear that was just listening to, my surroundings? And I found that very odd. And I got a strong kind of sense that whatever this entity was trying to say something to me. It was trying to make contact, of course, but I felt like there was a purpose to that contact. Like it was trying to say something through words, but for some reason, and so that kind of, I kind of kept on walking, kind of shrugging it off. And it wasn't until maybe I really got home, and I laid down on my bed, and that's when it really hit me. It's like, okay, I actually had that experience. I actually heard a female voice, kind of like a moan, groan, or a whine, but it sounded like there were words trying to be formed. There was an effort to try to say something, but it just didn't go through. And, you know, crazy enough, the area that I was walking through, it was an area known for a particular a murder of a woman taking place. And so I immediately thought about that, because my good friend Crispy Flowers, he's the one who actually told me that story, and many years ago. And I just remembered it as soon as I really started thinking about it. I started thinking, well, that was a woman, And then instantly that story came into my mind, and I remembered. I was like, wow, someone actually, a woman did get murdered in that in or in the area that I was walking through. And it was crazy. It was crazy. I couldn't believe it. You know, I mean, I'm a believer, but I just found it hard to believe that I had an experience just like that. In the I can't snap, but imagine there was a snapping of the fingers, but just like that. Just like that. Almost nonchalantly. Just so fast. But it also felt like it was so long at the same time. It's weird. It's weird how time really distorts when you have, when you experience something so unreal or so out of the ordinary, that it's fast, it happens in an instant, but at the same time it feels like an eternity, as it's happening. And even when you recall it, you just get that overwhelming sense of of eternity itself. But at the same time, you get that sense of instant, of a quick instant, of a quick moment, a passing moment that happened in probably less than 5 seconds. So that's one story that that was about, you know what I considered to be a ghost. Or in particular, I should specify what I considered to be the ghost of the woman that got killed in that area. And so, as I mentioned earlier, it all kind of has to do with the whole, like, this episode is more about, this part, the first part about the paranormal phenomenon is about ghost stories, ghosts, you know and believe it or not, I have another one for all of you. I hope you're ready. I hope you're ready. So this next story actually took place around the same area. I cannot give a particular location for privacy reasons, but let's just assume that this is out in the middle of nowhere. Just assume that should be enough of a picture to paint. Nobody around, kind of no houses. It's just a particular area by itself. Just nothing but shrubs and trees and dirt everywhere. So you get the idea. So I was in this particular area, middle of nowhere in a sense, and it happened. I want to say this around October of 2017. I believe it was more towards like early October, or maybe it could have possibly been late September, but it was around that time. Fall of towards like kind of the beginning to middle of fall of 2017, and it was dark out, and I was you know I was hanging out with a friend, with Crispy Flowers actually, and we were listening to music. We were just relaxing and chilling, just like good friends do. And then there were some people that were passing by that came up to us, and they asked us if we had seen. It was some neighborhood kids, or teenagers, I should say, maybe like 15, 16 years old, and they came up to us, and they asked us, have you seen our sister? And I had no idea what he was talking about, and Crispy Flowers had no idea either. And then we looked as confused as could be. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I have a kind of a sore throat. But we looked as confused as can be, and the people that came up to us, they saw it was the brother and the sister of that particular girl that they were, their sister that they were looking for, and they saw that we were kind of just didn't have no idea what they were saying, or what they were talking about, I should say. And so I went up, and I said, like, no, we haven't seen a girl pass by through here. And they gave us kind of the story of what happened. that their sister kind of got into an argument with their parents, and she was so mad that she just decided to cool off and walk around the neighborhood, which in retrospect wasn't a very smart idea, just for the fact that in the neighborhood, kind of in the neighborhood that I'm in, it's not always the safest, especially not at night. There's a lot extra there's an extra danger factor around my area, during during the nighttime. And so, I don't, call it sexism, whatever you want. There's no reason a woman should be, or a girl should be out at night, like around, I think it was like 10 or 11 o'clock at night, which was, again, I reiterate, no girl should be out at that time, going through a pretty dangerous neighborhood at like 9 or 10 or 10 or 11 o'clock at night. It's just ridiculous. You're just asking for trouble. So anyway, back to the story. So we tell them, well, I tell them, you know, we haven't seen her, and so they just say, well, he gave me the brother gave me his number, so in case I see her, to stop her. He told me to stop her and to just call him immediately, because he lived very close by to where Crispy Flowers and I were, very very close by. And so he just said, call me. If you see her, stop her. Tell her that you talked to me, and that, just wait around. Or if you can, and if she's already heading home, could you do me the favor of going with her, escorting her, just so that she won't be alone. At least so that she'll have somebody, a guy with her, just in case something should happen. And in my mind, I was kind of thinking, wow, this guy's putting a lot of faith in me. He doesn't know me, but good thing that he came across me and not some other person with evil intentions. Because honestly, I felt pretty bad, and I was kind of scared for him in that sense, because I thought, well, it is dangerous here, and I've seen a lot of the dangers. And I told him, you know what, I got, in almost verbatim, I got you, man, I got you. That's what I told him, because I was just, honestly, I was scared for them, because it's a horrible thing to see a tragedy, especially when it's, I mean, not that there's any particular tragedy that's lesser than another, but for me personally, I always find it more tragic when something happens to a woman, or I should say, not just a woman, but anybody that's still young, a teenager, whether it be a guy or girl. Honestly, it's tragic, and I just didn't want to go through that kind of experience of just knowing that I could have done something, and the next day you hear that this girl, something happened to her, something bad, real bad. She's either missing or she's dead. So I felt the sympathy for him, and not only that, but I felt pretty strongly about, if I do, if I was to actually kind of keep an open eye out to look for her. And so he leaves. Shortly after Crispy Flowers leaves, so, because it was getting pretty late, and he said that he had to go home at a particular time. So I was like, okay, so I'll see you later. And so at this point, I'm in this middle of nowhere area by myself, and I'm still, hanging out, listening to music and stuff, just truly relaxing, enjoying the outdoors. And so a couple of, I want to say maybe like 20 minutes passed since I was basically left by myself, and pretty close, like at, maybe like 30 feet away or so, I start hearing footsteps. And mind you, it's dark, so I can't see very well at all. But I start hearing footsteps, because there's a lot of like loose rocks in the middle of nowhere area. A lot of them, so if someone's walking, you're going to hear the crunching and the clanking of rocks everywhere. And these footsteps just seem to come out of nowhere. It's almost like they just appeared out of thin air. And so I start hearing, a person's footsteps. And the reason why I say a person's, and I'm sorry I neglected to mention this earlier in the story, but the brother did mention that the sister was with a dog, a very large dog. So there's a canine, 4 legs, that I've clarified that, back to the story. So I start hearing two footsteps, like someone, a person walking. Just the two is like left, right, like the crunching of the rocks and movement. And then I'm the first thing that comes to mind is it must be the girl. So I call out and I say, hey, it's like your brother's looking for you. I'm just trying to get her attention, trying to tell like, that her brother's looking for her, that her family's worried, and that, trying to tell her like, hey, like stay there, or I'll call your brother, or, like I can take you back home or something. Because, I honestly thought it was her. But then all of a sudden, the footsteps just stopped. They just stopped. Out of just as just quickly they stopped. And I'm still, me believing that it's the girl, and that maybe she thought that there was some truth to what I was saying, and that not only that, but that her brother was already looking for her, or her family was looking for her. Maybe I thought that she was, kind of processing all of this, all the things that I was saying. And so, again, I apologize for the wind, but there was kind of a feeling that I started getting, because I kept calling out. It's like, are you the girl? Like, I just kept asking over and over, periodically throughout my explanation. It's like, are you the girl, are you the sister that they're looking for? They're looking for you. I just kept, saying things like that over and over, because I wouldn't get a single reply, and I was, 100% convinced that there was someone there, because I could hear the footsteps clearly. And then I waited a bit, kind of in silence, and then shortly after, maybe like 2 or 3 minutes after, it was just silent, and I was just kind of looking in the direction where I heard the noise, but I couldn't see anything because it was too dark. And then all of a sudden, I hear the crunching, more footsteps again, but it wasn't a two-person footstep anymore. It wasn't just a person footstep, like that was gone. It turned into just, as if a canine, or someone, or some kind of animal on four legs was walking in this, in the same route that the person, that what sounded like a person was taking. And so I started thinking, well, maybe that's the dog. But then I started kind of piecing, like putting two and two together, trying to get the puzzles, and it doesn't match. Because when I heard a person's footsteps, I didn't hear a dog following them or anywhere around. I didn't hear a single thing. And when the dog, the or the four-legged footsteps came into the picture, I didn't hear the person walking with this animal. If like I didn't hear any person's footsteps anymore. It's almost like it was a person at first, and then it stopped. Then all of a sudden, it turned into an animal, a four-legged animal. And I'm assuming it was a canine, because to me it sounded more like a dog's way of walking. And they were pretty heavy footsteps, and that's why I believe it was canine, because it sounded heavy enough. And so, as as the four-legged footsteps are going on, they go on for maybe like 3 to 5 seconds, and then all of a sudden they disappear in the brush. And then you hear it enter the brush for like maybe like 2 seconds max. Then all of a sudden it just disappears. Like there's no more noise. And it's not like it was running. It sounded like this creature, this four-legged creature, just walked into the shrubs, out of view, out of sight. And it just walked in there, and then all of a sudden the steps stopped and they just disappeared, and then I didn't hear anything from at that point. And after all of that, I thought that wasn't the girl. In the end, I thought, oh my goodness, that's not the girl. That wasn't even the dog. I don't know what that was. I don't know. Like, I was trying to process what I had heard. I just couldn't believe it. Because to my mind, and even to this day, to my mind, it was it was possibly a ghost of a person, or some entity trying to pass themselves off as a person, and then all of a sudden an animal, the spirit of an animal or some entity trying to pass themselves off as an animal. And it was such a quick transition, you know, it's such a notable difference that I thought ghost, it had to be a ghost or some sort of paranormal entity. And to this day, I still don't know what, like, exactly who I heard or what I heard, because it was too dark for me to see. But it's always in the back of my mind, and especially when when I visit this middle of nowhere place, I always wonder what will happen next. It's like this is probably just the tip of the iceberg, the very probably a molecule of the tip of the iceberg. There's more than likely more type of paranormal phenomena that happen in this middle of nowhere area. And so with that, ladies and gentlemen, I um, loyal listeners, with that, that concludes the first part of the paranormal phenomenon series. I will have one little extra thing to ask: the challenge question. I know I was already forgetting it. I'm not gonna lie. I was forgetting the challenge question. Thankfully, I remember. So here's the challenge question for all of you. What's your story? What's your paranormal story? What's your ghost story? Not necessarily cryptids or any other beings, but like ghosts themselves or demons for that matter. If you have a story or something paranormal of a spirit nature or a deceased human or a demonic inhuman entity, you know, what's your story? That's my challenge question. Do you have a story? And if you do, post it in the comments. Post it in the comments. That way I can, I'm very, very excited to read your stories and your true stories, I should say. And just to have more insight into what people really experience, because we live in a world that's not only to ourselves. There is this other element, this other layer of phenomenon that happens, and we can't explain it. We've tried, and we have a pretty good idea of it, but we still can't prove it. We can't explain it, because it's just like the wind. It's like, how do you catch the wind? Every time there's a camera, it eludes it, and if it shows up, it's not enough to be concrete evidence. So, with that, to reiterate the challenge question, what's your story? What's your ghost story? Have a good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and a good night. Sleep well. This is Uncle Louie saying, I'll catch you on the next.